Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth lecture of Module 3 on IPsec Security at the Network Layer. Coming to the outline of this video, initially we'll go through security at different layers and its pros and cons. Next we'll study the working of IPsec. Next, Internet Key Exchange Protocol, one of the application layer protocol. Finally, the virtual private networks. So initially we'll go through how to provide security at different layers and what are its pros and cons. So security may be implemented at different layers of the OSI model, but we are interested in security at the network layer and above. More precisely, security is commonly implemented in the network layer, between the transport and the application layer, and within the application. Now, implementing security for each individual application is less attractive compared to implementing it at the single point, which can then be availed by all applications. Ideally, neither users nor the application need to be made aware of where and how the security is provided. Providing security at the network layer has least bearing on an application. On the other hand, implementing security at the network layer will necessitate some changes in the operating system kernel. So while the application developer may have less need to worry about the security, the system administrator may have to confront issues of configuring and compatibility issues need to be taken care as he attempts to deploy security solution at the network layer. Now, implementing security between the transport and the application layer overcomes the need for any changes in the operating system. However, application developer should be aware of application programming interfaces provided by the new security layer so that they can be employed in developing secure applications. Next, we'll study about IPsec protocol. So, IPsec is the best known protocol for providing security at the network layer. IPsec has been designed by the committee in the late 1990s. It was intended to protect against sniffing, spoofing, hijacking, and denial of service attack. Now, it provides services like data origin authentication and data integrity, protection from replay attacks, data confidentiality, and partial traffic flow confidentiality. Now, the endpoints of the protocols can be two hosts, two gateways, and a host and a gateway. That is, all the service that is listed above can be provided between two hosts, between two gateways, and a host and a gateway. Before we go through IPsec protocol, we need to know what is IPsec Security Association, that is SA. So before two parties can communicate securely, they need to establish a security association with each other. So the information present in an SA includes the lifetime of the association, that is the validity period of the association. Next, IPsec mode. IPsec protocol basically works in two modes, that is transport mode and tunnel mode. Next is cryptographic parameters, the algorithm used for encrypting, if any, and for computing the integrity check together with the keys we need to mention. Next, 32-bit sequence number. The first packet protected by a newly established CA bears the sequence number 1. Then the sequence number gets incremented for each packet that is being sent over a security association. Finally, an anti-replay window. Now, a node may establish IP security association with several nodes. An SA is uniquely identified by the combination of 32-bit security parameter index, that is SPI, and the IP address of the connection endpoint. Each IPsec packet contains a value of SPI in its header. This is used by the receiving node to identify the SA to be used for processing the packet. Now, each node has a database of SAs for all connections originating from and terminating at it. Now, this database is referred to as SA database, that is SADB. Finally, it should be noted that the two communicating parties A and B establishes two SAs, one for communication between A and B and the another from B to A. Next, we will study IPsec protocol in detail. So, IPsec includes two protocols, AH and ESP. AH is called as authentication header and ESP is called as encapsulating security payload. The main difference between the AH and ESP is that AH has no provision for confidentiality, while ESP provides confidentiality as an option. It means that AH does not provide encryption of the packet, while ESP provides encryption as an option. Means if we want, we can use it. Now these protocols can be used in either of the two modes, that is transport mode or tunnel mode. Next we'll go through both AH and ESP header in transport mode. As you can see, this is the IP packet. So in IP packet, initially we'll have IP header, next followed by AH header, next transport header, finally the transport payload. As you can see, the AH header is sandwiched between the IP header and the transport header, and it also shows the scope of authentication. So it provides authentication for the entire, starting from the AH header to the transport payload, but when it comes to IP header, only some part of the IP header is provided authentication, not the entire IP header. So coming to AH header in detail, so this shows the different fields that is present in AH header. So initially we have the SPI, that is the security parameter index, which is used by the Security Association at the receiver end, which is a 32-bit value. Next we have a sequence number, again which is a 32-bit value, which is used to protect against the replay attack. Finally we have the HMAC value. So HMAC value is used for the integrity purpose. So HMAC is computed for the entirety starting from the AH header to the transport payload, but when it comes to IP header, only some part of IP header we calculate MAC value. That is basically the source and the IP address information that will provide integrity, whereas some of the mutable parts like TLL, TOS and the header checksum fields, for those we don't provide HMAC. Instead of that, what we do is we make all those fields as 0 and then we apply HMAC on the packet, and that value is stored here in the header. That value is stored in the AH header. Now it takes about 96 bits in order to represent HMAC in AH header. So next we'll go through ESP in transport mode. So ESP security information is being split into two fields, that is ESP header and ESP trailer, whereas ESP header is sandwiched between the IP header and the transport header, and ESP trailer is appended at the end of the IP packet. As we can see the scope of encryption, the encryption is provided for the transport header, transport payload and some part of ESP trailer. Coming to scope of authentication, authentication is provided only from ESP header till ESP trailer, including transport header and transport payload, but it doesn't provide authentication to IP header, whereas in AH protocol it provides authentication for the some part of the IP header, whereas in this case it doesn't provide authentication. Next we'll see ESP header and ESP trailer in detail. So ESP header has only two information, that is SPI security parameter index, which is used by the receiver with respect to security association. Next it has the sequence number, which is used in order to prevent the replay attack, followed by the transport header and transport payload we have. Finally it ends with the padding. So padding is added so that the length of the encrypted payload is a multiple of the block size, and padding also helps in hiding the actual length of the data when ESP is used with the encryption option turned on. Next we need to mention the pad length, that is how many bytes we have padded to the transport payload. Next finally we have the last field in the ESP trailer is HMAC. Now HMAC is computed for ESP header, transport payload and the ESP trailer, but not to IP header. So that value is stored at the ESP trailer, that is HMAC. Next, we'll study AH and ESP protocol in tunnel mode. The main difference between the tunnel mode and the transport mode is that in transport mode, the protection is provided only for the transport header and the transport payload, whereas in tunnel mode, the protection is provided for the IP header, transport header, and the transport payload. That is the addition of providing protection for the IP header is there in tunnel mode. So next, we'll see AH header in detail. In case of AH header, we can see the only difference is that the IP header is being split into two, that is outer IP header and the inner IP header. Now the inner IP header is nothing but the original IP header which is sandwiched between AH header and the transport header, but outer IP header has only some basic information which is required for routing. So coming to the scope of authentication, the authentication is provided for entirely from AH header to transport payload, including the original IP packet header. But coming to outer IP header, it provides authentication only for the sum part. For the mutable part, it won't provide authentication. Coming to ESP in tunnel mode, again it has outer IP header and inner IP header. Inner IP header is the original IP packet header, which is encapsulator or sandwiched between ESP header and the transport header. And outer IP header has only some basic information which is required for routing. Coming to the scope of encryption, now encryption is provided from inner IP header to the transport payload. So in transport mode, we have seen encryption was provided only for transport header and the transport payload. In this case, we provide for IP header as well. Coming to scope of authentication, authentication is provided from ESP header to some part of ESP trailer. So we know that ESP doesn't provide authentication to the outer IP header. Next, let us consider an example. So the most compelling use of an IPsec in tunnel mode is in securing host to host and host to gateway communication. So let us consider the communication between two users A and B who are in two networks, separate networks, network 1 and network 2, where communication happens via the internet. Now suppose that user A wants to send a packet to user B, but in network 2 there is a security policy that any packet entering into the network 2 need to pass through the gateway D. That is, the gateway D need to authenticate the incoming packet, only then the packet will be routed to any of the nodes present in that network. So we say that now if A wants to send a packet to B, then basically now B need to be tunneled inside the packet of A to D. So this is shown in the packet here. So in case 1, so the outer IP header has the source A and source D. Basically now A is sending the packet to D. It is initially being routed to D. So on receiving the packet, now D, what it does is it will authenticate the user A. If the authentication is successful, then D will strip off the outer IP header. Then it performs the decryption of the rest of the packet. Then later it strips off the ESP header and the ESP trailer. Then D will check for who is the destination I have to basically route to. So in this case the destination is B. So then D will route the packet to B. So this is how host to gateway tunneling is achieved. Okay. So we will take one more case. So in the previous case we have considered that A is a user who is IPsec enabled. So if we consider that if A is not IPsec enabled, and instead of that now C is the gateway C in the network 1 is responsible for providing authentication and integrity for all the packet that is going outside of the network. Then in that case, if A wants to send a packet to B, then the tunneling of A and B happens inside the packet from C to D. Now that is shown here. So in the outer IP, we have the source C and destination D. Means now source C is sending the packet to source C is sending the packet to D. Okay. So once a packet is reached by D, it will authenticate C, not A. The reason is that now C is responsible for all the packet that is going outside its network with respect to authentication and encryption. So D will be authenticating C. Now when the authentication is successful, it strips out the outer IP and it performs a decryption. On decryption, it again strips off the ESP header and the ESP trailer. Next, D will look for who is the destination. So the destination is B, it will route the packet to B. So you can see here that the source in the outer IP header is gateway C in network 1 and gateway D in network 2, and the inner IP header, you can see that the source and destination is A and B. So basically A and B is tunneled inside the packet from C to D. So here we can see a gateway to gateway tunnel, because C to D it was sent. So here it is a host to gateway tunnel, that is from A to D it was sent. Next we'll study Internet Key Exchange Protocol, that is IKE. So the main goal of IKE is to establish a security association between two parties that wish to communicate securely using IPsec. We know that if you are using IPsec for a communication, then before that an security association need to be established. So that goal can be achieved using Internet Key Exchange Protocol. So IKE is an application layer protocol using connectionless UDP protocol on port number 500. So IKE comprises of two phases. In the first phase, an IKE SA is established. This creates a secure channel upon which the communicating parties can then establish multiple IPsec SA instances over time in phase 2. So in phase 1, we establish IKE SA. In phase 2, we can establish multiple IPsec SA. Now I can give an analogy for what is IKE SA. IKE SA is something like you establish a session. A session can have multiple connections. So that is nothing but IPsec SA created over IKE SA. So in phase 1, long-term keys are derived. Phase 1 occurs very rarely and is more computationally intensive compared to phase 2. In phase 2, short-term keys are derived for use between the two parties. Now this key is a function of long-term keys computed in phase 1 together with the nonces exchanged in phase 2. So in phase 1 we make use of long-term keys, in phase 2 we make use of short-term keys. Now short-term keys are derived using the long-term keys that is chosen in phase 1. Before we go through Internet Key Exchange Protocol in detail, we need to know what is IPsec cookies. So phase 1 of IKE uses Diffie-Hellman key exchange, which involves a computationally intense modular exponentiation operation. But it is vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attack, session hijacking and DOS attack, that is denial of service attack. Now to prevent DOS attack, IKE makes extensive use of cookies. Now IKE mandates to compute a 64-bit integer called a cookie. One cookie is created by the initiator and another by the responder. In this case, the initiator is A, the responder is B. So cookie value computed by A, which is represented as CA, how it is done we'll see. So this is the hash function of many variables including the IP address of A, a temporary secret known only to B, and possibly the time. So they take many variables, out of which the main are the IP address of A will be taken, a temporary secret known only to B, and possibly the current time will be taken, and a cookie is created by A, that is called as CA. A is required to send this cookie to B in all the subsequent messages. Now on receipt of the message, that is the cookie message from A, B will check to see that whether the cookie corresponds to A's IP address. So in every message, when B receives a cookie, it will check that whether the IP address in the cookie is with respect to the IP address of the sender. If the check fails, B will abort the session establishment there itself. Now the cookie computed by B is represented as CB. is sent in message 2 must be included in all the message sent by either party thereafter. In similar manner, a cookie CA which is initially created by A need to be sent in all the subsequent messages. Next we will go through IKE phase 1, where we are going to establish IKE security association. Now following are accomplished in the first phase. They are the authentication method, the encryption method, the hash algorithm together with the Diffie-Hellman groups to be used are negotiated, that is they are decided. Both parties authenticate themselves to each other. Keys such as key A and key E are computed. Now these keys are used for integrity and encryption respectively in both phase 1 and phase 2. So key A is used for the integrity purpose and key E is used for encryption purpose. Similarly, cookies are created at the start of the phase 1 and serves the purpose of IKE connection identifier. So these 4 are accomplished in IKE phase 1. So phase 1 uses one of the two modes, that is main mode or aggressive mode. So main mode involves a total of 6 messages between the initiator and the responder, whereas aggressive method uses only 3 messages. So next we will go through phase 1 main mode, which involves a total of 6 messages between the initiator and the responder. Next we will go through IKE phase 1 main mode. So main mode has 3 options. First option is A and B share a secret key. Second option is A and B have a private signing keys. Option 3 is A and B each have a private decryption key. So we will go through the first option, A and B share a secret key. So before we do the IKE association, both A and B have shared a secret key. Let that secret be indicated as S. Okay. So A will send a message to B that is comprises of 2 components, that is CA and SA of A. So CA indicates the cookie of A and SA indicates the cryptographic algorithm that is proposed by A. So on receiving this message, now B will generate the second message which comprises of CA that is obtained from the first message and also CB that is nothing but the cookie of B, and also it places the SA of B which indicates the cryptographic algorithm proposed by B. Once it is received by A, now A will compute the partial Diffie-Hellman key that is nothing but G to the power A mod P. Okay. So along with the cookie A and cookie B, it will send G to the power A mod P. Along with that, it chooses a random number called as RA and it is sent in the message 3. On receiving this message, now B will compute the Diffie-Hellman partial key that is G to the power B mod P and it sends in the 4th message along with the random number that is chosen by B, that is RB. So there are 4 components, cookie of A, cookie of B, G to the power B mod P and RB that is sent to A. So on receiving this 4 message, now both the parties will generate the Diffie-Hellman shared key that is G to the power AB mod P. So once that is generated, now both the parties will generate further 4 more keys, that is key R, key D, key A and key E. Now key R indicates the subscript R, D, A, E indicates R indicates root, D indicates derived, A indicates authentication, E indicates encryption. So how key R is created or computed? So we use a function called as pseudo-random function that is indicated by PRF, which takes 2 components. First one is S. S indicates the shared secret key that is being shared by both A and B, and also the second parameter is the concatenation of RA and RB that is exchanged in the 3rd and 4th message, that is a random number chosen by A and B. So it generates the key R. Once the key R is generated, it computes key D, that is a derived key. Again the same pseudo-random function is applied. So the first parameter is key R that is computed previously. Along with that, the second parameter is a concatenation of G to the power AB concatenated with cookie A, cookie B and 0. Now this will compute key D. Once key D is computed, next you need to compute key A, that is authentication key. Again pseudo-random function is applied on First parameter is key R, next is key D, that is a derived key, and it is concatenated with G to the power AB mod P, then cookie A, cookie B, and finally 1 is being concatenated. So this will generate the authentication key. Finally, the encryption key is computed, which is again a pseudorandom function applied on the root key, and second parameter is the authentication key concatenated with G of AB mod P, then cookie A, cookie B, and 2. This computes the key E, that is encryption key. So once this is done, now the user A will compute MAC A and the user B will compute MAC B. Again, MAC A is computed as a pseudo-random function applied on key A, that is the authentication key, along with the second parameter, which is a concatenation of GA concatenated with GB, that is the Diffie-Hellman partial keys, then the cookie A, cookie B, and SA of A. Now SA of A is the cryptographic algorithm proposed by A, that is exchanged in first message, and also the identity of A. Similarly, now B will compute the MAC B, that is again a pseudo-random function applied on the authentication key G, and second parameter is G to the power B mod P, and concatenated with G to the power A mod P, which is the Diffie-Hellman partial keys, and the cookie B, the cookie A, and SA of A, which is nothing but your this should be SA of B, which is nothing but the cryptographic algorithm proposed by B, and finally the identity of B. So once this is computed, so in fifth message, what user A will send is the certificate of A, the cookie of A, the cookie of B. Along with that, it will also send the identity of A and MAC A, that is computed by A, which is encrypted using key E, that is nothing but encryption key. So here K indicates the key E, E indicates encryption. So encryption done using key E on the identity of A and the MAC A, that is computed by the user A. So once this is received by user B, now user B need to compute the MAC of A. So in order to compute the MAC of A, it requires the user A's identity. So that is there in this message. So it does the decryption, because since the key E is also computed by the user B, it decrypts the message, it gets the identity A, and it computes MAC A. User B computes MAC A. Now the computed MAC A, if it is equivalent to what MAC A is received in fifth message, then B authenticates A. So once this is done, now B will generate the sixth message. It comprises of cookie A, cookie B, and it also places the identity of B and MAC B, which is encrypted again using key K, that is nothing but key of E, encryption key, and that is sent to B. On receiving, it decrypts the message, it picks the identity, and user A will compute MAC B. Because MAC B requires the identity of B, it will compute the MAC B. Now the computed MAC B, if it is equivalent to the MAC B that is received in message 6, then A authenticates B. So in the last two communication, that is 5 and 6, the authentication of each of the parties happens, that is mutual authentication happens. So in first message, agreement of the cryptographic algorithms between A and B happens. Next, the generation of key happens in third and fourth step, and in the fifth step, fifth and sixth step, the authentication of A and B happens. Next, we'll go through IKE phase 1 main mode, second option, that is A and B each have the private signing keys. So in this case, now initially A will send a message which comprises of CA, that is cookie A, along with that SA of A, which is the cryptographic algorithm that is proposed by A. Similarly, now B will send the cookie A, cookie B, and SA of B, that is again the cryptographic algorithm that is proposed by B. On receiving this, now in third message, the A user will generate the Diffie-Hellman partial key G to the power A mod P. Along with that, it chooses a random number RA, and it is sent to B along with the cookies of both the parties. And in the fourth message, now B will compute its Diffie-Hellman partial key, that is g to the power b mod p, and it chooses a random number rb. Along with the cookie, it will send in the fourth message. So on the reception of fourth message, now both the parties will generate the Diffie-Hellman shared key, that is g to the power ab mod p. So once that is done, it will generate all the rest of the four keys, that is key R, key D, key A and key E, that is nothing but the root, derived, authentication and encryption key respectively. Now the key R in option 2 is different than in option 1. The rest of the keys are computed in the same way. So here key R, this root key, is nothing but the pseudo random function applied on the first parameter, that is the random number chosen by A concatenated with the random number chosen by B. The second parameter is nothing but g to the power ab mod p. Now g to the power ab mod p is generated after the fourth message, which includes the private key of each of the user, that is A indicates the private key of A, B indicates the private key of B, and g to the power ab computation involves the private key of both A and B. Okay, now then this key is used to generate again the derived key, the authentication key and the encryption key. So even though the formulas are same, the way the computation is same, but it depends on a root key. So if the root key is changed, the whole value of all the other keys also will change. Okay, so once all the keys are generated, so in the it also computes the MAC of A and MAC of B. So MAC A is computed by A, MAC B is computed by B. So once that is done, now A will send a message to B. So what it will send? It will send the cookie of A, cookie of B. Along with that, it will also encrypt the three components, that is identity of A. Then it will send the signature of A. Along with that, it will send the certificate of A. This whole thing is encrypted using the key K, which is nothing but the encryption key. So on receiving that, since B also has key of E, it will decrypt it. And first thing it does is it checks for the identity. If the identity A, that is verified using the certificate A, then the signature need to be verified. In order to verify the signature, it needs the public key. So public key is again obtained from the certificate. It will use the certificate, verify the signature. If it is valid, then B has authenticated A. Then next, in the sixth message, now B will send the cookie of A, the cookie of B. Along with that, it places the identity of B, the signature of B and the certificate of B. This whole thing is encrypted using key of E. Okay. On reception, it will decrypt the message, it will check for the identity and in the certificate also, and it will try to verify the signature. In order to verify the signature, it requires a public key of B, which is obtained from the certificate. It does the verification. Once the verification is done, if it is successful, then basically B has authenticated A. So similar to option 1, the first two steps, there is an exchange of cookies and SA. In second, third and fourth message, basically we'll be exchanging partial keys and then we'll generate the 4 keys. And in the last two steps, the authentication is done between both the sender and the receiver. Now we'll consider the last option, that is IK phase 1 main mode, third option, that is A and B each have private decryption keys. There is nothing but both the user A and B will be having their own public key and private key. So let us see how it works. So A will initially send the certificate cookie of A, and it also sends SA of A. On receiving that, it will generate the second message, that is cookie of A, cookie of B, along with that the SA of B. So on receiving that, now it will generate the third message. So third message comprises of both the cookies CA and CB. Along with that, it chooses a random number RB. It chooses a random number RB, which is encrypted using B's public key. Okay, B.PU indicates encryption using B's public key. So again, it creates one more component which includes the Diffie-Hellman partial key, that is g to the power A mod P, which is concatenated using with the identity of A, and this whole thing is encrypted using the key KA. Now how K is computed? Now K is the hash of RA, that is a random number chosen by A, along with that the cookie of A. Okay, so using that value, it is being encrypted. Now on receiving this, if it has to decrypt this one, it need to know what is RA. So to know RA, it is encrypted using B's public key. So using B's private key, it does the decryption, it obtains RA, it computes what is KA. Since it has CA, it has obtained RA here, it will compute what is KA and does the decryption of this one. On decryption, it will get G to the power A and also gets the identity of A. Okay, so in the third message, similarly, now B will embed both the cookies. Along with that, it chooses a random number RB, which is again encrypted using A's public key, and along with that, it also places G to the power B, that is a Diffie-Hellman partial key generated by B, and along with that, the identity of B, which is again encrypted using KB. Now KB indicates the hash of RB, CB. RB is nothing but the random number chosen by B, and along with the cookie of B, the hash value, whatever you get, that is KB. Okay, so this message is encrypted using KB. So on receiving this message, in order to encrypt this, decrypt this one, it requires RB. So it performs decryption using A's private key. It gets RB. Using RB, it computes what is KB. Once KB is computed, it will decrypt this message. On decryption, it will get the Diffie-Hellman partial key, and it also gets the identity of P. So on receiving this, now both the parties will compute G to the power AB mod P. Then it will compute these four keys, that is root key, derived key, authentication key and encryption key. Now similar to option 1 and option 2, these three key, that is key D, key A and key E computations are same. The only difference is there in the root key. Now root key is a pseudo random function applied on first parameter is RA concatenated with RB, that is the random number chosen by A and B. The next component is the cookie A concatenated with cookie B. Okay, so here the root key is changed. Once the root key changes, it affects all the other keys, that is derived keys, authentication key and encryption key as well, which in turn affects the calculation of MAC. Okay, so once the keys are being generated, now both the parties will generate MAC of both the parties. So in the previous two options, they could compute at this point only the MAC of their self, that is A would compute only the MAC of A and B can compute only the MAC of B. So in this case, since the identity is already retrieved of each of the other user, so it will compute, both party will compute MAC A and MAC B, that is A will be having MAC A, MAC B and B also will be having MAC A, MAC B. Okay. So in the fifth message, now what the user A will send is, it will embed both the cookies. Along with that, it will send MAC A, which is encrypted using key K, that is nothing but encryption K. So on receiving this one, if the computed MAC A by B is equivalent to MAC of A that is received in the fifth message, then B has authenticated A. In the sixth message, again it will embed both the cookies. Along with that, the MAC B computed by B, which is encrypted using the encryption key KE, is sent. On receiving this, it decrypts the message. It compares whether the computed MAC B by A is equivalent to whatever is received. So if it is equal, then basically A has authenticated B. So in this way, again the first two step is used for the exchange of this cookies and the essays. The third and fourth step is used for third and fourth communication is used for generation of keys, and also in this case we also exchange the identity of both the user. And in the sixth and fifth and sixth communication, basically authentication happens. Next we'll go through IKE phase 1 aggressive mode. So aggressive mode involves 3 messages. So the main difference between the aggressive mode and the main mode is that the identities of A and B are sent in clear in message 1 and message 2. So in main mode, we used to send the identity of A and B in an encrypted form, whereas in aggressive mode, we sent in a clear text format. Another aspect of IKE phase 1 in aggressive mode is that the Diffie-Hellman group is used and the group parameters are decided by A itself during the exchange of first message. So it basically decides what should be the Diffie-Hellman group, that is Z star P, and also it decides the parameter what should be the value of P and what should be the generator value. So that is decided by A itself. So B has no choice but to quietly accept the group that is chosen by A, and it has to generate its Diffie-Hellman partial key. Now let us go through all the three options in aggressive mode. The first option is sharing a secret key, second option is private key signature, third one is private decryption key. So coming to the first one, so in the first message A will send the cookie of A, the essay of A, then the Diffie-Hellman partial key, that is G to the power A mod P, then also sends the array, that is a random number chosen by A along with the identity of A. Now on receiving this message, now B will generate the cookie of B, it will generate the essay of B, and it will compute G to the power B mod P, and it will choose a random number RB. So on computing G to the power B and choosing RB, now it will generate all the other keys including the Diffie-Hellman shade key. That is nothing but it has got G to the power A mod P now, and it has computed G to the power B mod P. Now it will compute G to the power AB mod P here itself before sending the message, and it also computes all the rest of the keys, that is nothing but key are root key, derived key, authentication key, and it computes the encryption key. Once that is done, next it will compute the MAC B. Since it has received all the other values and it has computed the keys, it will compute MAC P, and even that is embedded in the second message along with the identity of P. Now on receiving this, now user A will start generating the keys, that is G to the power AB mod P, along with that the root key, derived key, encryption key, and authentication key. Along with that it will compute only the MAC of B. Now the MAC of B computed, if it is equivalent to the MAC of B received in the second message, then A has authenticated B. So in third message, now A will send the MAC of B that is just now computed, okay, along with the cookie of A and cookie of B. So on receiving this, if the MAC of B received in message 3 is equivalent to the MAC of B that is computed in message 2, now B has authenticated A. So the sending of the cookies and essay and the partial key and the random number happens in first message. Once the first message is received by B, the generation of keys of B happens immediately after the first message is received, and once the second message is received by A, the generation of key happens immediately after the second message. Once that is done, then the authentication happens. The authentication of B happens immediately after the second message. The authentication of A happens immediately after the receiving of the third message. So coming to now private key signature, now initially A will send the cookie of A, the essay of A, and the Diffie-Hellman partial key G to the power A mod P, and the random number chosen by A along with the identity of A. So on receiving that, as I said before, it will generate all the keys once the G to the power B mod B is computed and the RB is chosen. Once all the keys are generated, it will embed now the identity of B, along with that signature of the B, along with that it will send the certificate of B. Now on receiving this one, first we will check for the identity. So B is received, whether certificate has the same identity. If so, then it will verify the signature using the public key that is present in the certificate. Once the verification is successful, now basically A has authenticated B. Okay, now A starts to generate all the other rest to generate the keys, that is the root key, derived key, encryption key, and the authentication key. Along with that, the MACs are also computed. So once that is done, now it will send the third message, which comprises of the cookies of both the parties, along with that the signature of A and the certificate of A. So on receiving this from A, it will use the public key that is present in the certificate and verify the signature. If the verification is successful, then basically B has authenticated A. Now let us go to the final option, that is private decryption key. In this case, A will send the cookie of A, the essay of A, along with that it will choose a random number RA which is encrypted using B's public key. Along with that, it will also embed the definite partial key which is concatenated with the identity of A, and this whole thing is encrypted using a key called as KA. Now K is nothing but the hash of the cookie of A and the random number array. So on receiving this one, using its private key, it will decrypt this value, it will obtain array. Now using array, it will generate the key KA. Now once the key is obtained, it will decrypt this value, it will get the partial key GA, and also it will get the identity of A. So on receiving this, it will generate all the rest of the keys, that is root key, derived key, authentication key and encryption key along with the MACs. MAC of A is computed. Once that is done, it will generate the second message. Now on receiving this message, now initially it will decrypt this component using its private key. It will obtain RB. Now using RB, it will compute what is KB. KB is nothing but the hash of CB and RB. Once KB is obtained, it will decrypt that component. It will obtain G to the power B and it will obtain the identity of B. On receiving that, it will compute all the rest of the keys, that is G to the power AB mod P is computed. Then it computes all the rest of the keys, that is root key, derived key, authentication key, encryption key along with the MAC A and MAC B. Now the obtained then basically it decrypts this one also using the encryption key to obtain MAC of A. Now the computed MAC of A, if it is equivalent to the received MAC A in second message, then A has authenticated B. Then in the last message, what A does is it chooses the MAC B that is computed by A and encrypt it using the key K, which is nothing but the encryption key, and that is sent to B. On receiving that, it will decrypt this value. If the MAC B obtained in message 3 is equivalent to the MAC A computed just after receiving the message 1, then B will authenticate A. So we are done with IKE phase 1. Next we will go through IKE phase 2. So once an IKE phase 1, that is nothing but IKE SA is established, next we need to go for IKE IPsec SA. That is nothing but once a session is established, in order to establish a connection between two parties in order to communicate, we need to go through phase 2, that is we need to establish IPsec SA. So the two parties participating in IKE phase 2 exchange in order to establish a new IPsec SA. So either party can initiate this phase in which the cipher suit and the keys that comprise the new IPsec SA are agreed upon. The figure represents IKE phase 2 in quick mode. So there are three messages that is exchanged between A and B. Now all the three messages are encrypted using the key E that is being exchanged in or generated in phase 1. So which is not shown in the diagram, but it actually happens. It also provides message integrity and authentication using HMAC, which makes use of a key A, which is also computed in phase 1. So let us go through the three messages. So initially A will send the cookie of A and cookie of B. Along with that, it will send the MID. Now MID represents a 32-bit quantity, which is a message ID, which is used in order to differentiate an IPsec SA within an IKE SA. That is nothing but to differentiate each connection in a session, okay, which is unique for a connection in a session. So again it sends the SA of A, that is nothing but the cryptographic algorithm agreed on A. Then also nouns NA that is chosen by A in order to maintain the freshness of the message. Now these are the 5 parameters that are sent. For now we won't consider this part, okay, whichever is there in bracket. So on reception of this, now what B does is it chooses a random number NB and it computes a secret key. Now secret key is a function of key D, NA and NB. So NA is sent in first message, NB is chosen by B at this point of time, and key D is already generated in phase 1. So using these three values, it will generate a secret key which is further used for communication between A and B in the current IPsec association. Okay, so once that is done, now it will send the second message to A, which comprises of this cookie of A, cookie of B, and the same MID value, which is the ID value of this particular IPsec association, and also the SA of B, that is the cryptographic algorithm that will be used by B, and also the NB, that is chosen by the random number chosen by B. So on receiving this, now even A will compute the same secret key as a function of key D, NA and NB. NA is sent by itself and NB is received in the second message. Key D is computed in first phase. So now both the parties have computed the secret key. So on completion of that, now A will send one more message which comprises of cookie of A, cookie of B, and also the MID. On receiving this, now the third message is just an acknowledgement for B to say that A has received the second message and it has computed the secret key. Now both has computed the secret key and it will use that secret key for further communication in the current IP security association. Okay, so coming to whatever is in bracket, it is for optional. If we want the addition perfect forward secrecy, then we can use these parameters as well in these communication. So along with these parameter, in the first communication, it also will send G to the power X, that is nothing but the Diffie-Hellman partial key G to the power X mod P, and along with that it will also send the ID of A and ID of B. So on receiving this, it will compute G to the power Y mod P, and it will also compute the Diffie-Hellman secret, that is G to the power XY mod P. So then it will send the second message along with the 5 parameter. It also sends G to the power Y and along with that the ID of A and the ID of P. So on receiving this, even now A will compute G to the power XY mod P. So even that can be used, that is G to the power XY mod P is being computed by both the parties at this point. So even that key can be used in order to exchange messages between A and B in the further communication in that IPsec association. This is why the bracket is placed here. It is optional, so if they want they can include. So at the end, the IPsec SA setup in phase 2 includes the mutually agreed upon cryptographic suite, that is nothing but SA, and the secret keys for authentication and or encryption. Now both sides will then create an entry for the new SA in their database of SAs. The last topic in this module, virtual private networks. A virtual private network enables organization to communicate securely over a public shared network such as internet. So a VPN uses cryptographic techniques to provide not just confidentiality but also authentication and message integrity. So in a trusted VPN, customer traffic is not usually encrypted. Service provider has to guarantee the confidentiality of the traffic. So two widely used VPNs are site-to-site and remote access VPN. So site-to-site VPNs are used to link multiple offices of an organization known as intranet. Site-to-site VPN may also be used to secure an extranet, a network connecting multiple business partners. Coming to remote access VPNs connect to teleworkers, that is nothing but the mobile user or the users from the home to their offices. So we are done with the fourth chapter of module 3. Thank you for watching this video.